Hey there guys, this is me, Malorian, and what this video is going to be about is about something a little bit different. It's not really tactical theory, it's not like kind of a review of a CID or anything like that, but it's going to be more so around a theory of what we're kind of dealing with right now, which is the 8 solo problem. Now, for those who don't know, very recently they had rolled out the Talion update, and for those who don't know what that is, that's the Pirate. So we had the Pirate CID a while ago, and it finally got released out, and everyone rejoiced until people started reading and seeing that whereas normally you get, for every X points you get a free solo, it was for every 25 points of privateers, you got 2 free solos or 2 free weapon teams. And so the real confusion was, well, first of all, like, this is pretty crazy. We've never seen something like this before. I mean, I guess we've kind of had the thing before where you get 2 free Krabbits, so there's something like that. But at the same time, this is not something anybody had on their radar, but yet it was right there. It said right there in the theme benefit that for every 25 points you got 2 free solos. Now, the other thing though is that even though they updated War Room only gave you 1 free solo. So the question quickly became, is this right? Is this wrong? I mean, really there's 3 real options here. Either you're supposed to be getting 1 free for every 25 points, or you're supposed to be getting 2 free for every 25 points, or the third one, maybe it's supposed to be either 1 free solo or 2 free weapon teams. Which one is it? Well, what happened is that Will Hungerford came out and said that this is something that they're going to need to go back and just look into. I guess right now it's a thing where several people on the dev team are just away, be it vacation or whatever it is. So it's something you have to wait till everybody's back in, discuss it, and then release. And so we're kind of left in this interesting limbo, and I thought this would be a good time to kind of chat about this and what it really means, just for not so much the hobby, but just the theory of the way that rules are released out to the players. Now, let's first go off with the first thing here. What if it's actually the way it's supposed to be written? What if it's supposed to be that for every 25 points of privateers, you get 2 free solos? And just something to make sure that everybody is aware of here, because there's privateer models and solos, and then as well privateer jacks themselves. That's why you get to 8, because you have your 75 points of normal stuff, and then of course if you have a warcaster with at least 25 warjack points, and you make sure to take at least 25 of those of privateer jacks, that's how you can get to those 4 triggers, which turns into 8 free solos if we're going with that version. Well, I think the first thing we have to assess when you look at this is that okay? When we're looking at the number of free points you can be getting with 8 free solos, it's pretty significant. Now, on one side, you have to realize that there isn't the same value here that we're seeing from some other factions. And what I mean by that is that in some themes, you're getting 8-point free solos or 8-point free units, things like that, which are pretty massive. Now, when it comes to the Pirates, there's a couple of 5-point solos, but it very quickly goes down to 4 or 3-point solos. That said, when you go to 8 free ones, that still turns out to be quite a bit. So maybe the argument is that this is actually what the theme is really all balanced around. You have your Talion, which really, for the way you've looked back on things, has both been had a lot more solos. If you look back to Mark II, we used to have a little time where whenever you went through the Talion theme, basically, all your solos were 1 point. So whereas back then a lot of your solos were 2 points, you got to take kind of twice as many, which was amazing. So that kind of also lines up with twice as many free solos. So maybe that's the way it's supposed to be designed. The other thing that you should be looking at is like, well, maybe if there's twice as many solos, it's because the other stuff is weaker. And again, the way that this faction's supposed to work is as a lot of weaker units that really needed solos to really kind of help defend it and make it work. So this is all planned. This is what they meant to be. It's supposed to be 2 free solos. Well, that would be pretty unprecedented, and maybe if that's the way it's supposed to be, alright. But then it also kind of begs a question, is that if there's supposed to be 8 free solos, maybe the CID didn't work the way it was supposed to. I mean, if you really need to have like 30 free points in order to make a faction work, well, maybe some other thing should have been a little bit stronger so that you didn't have to do that. So that's the problem, is if we go with that solution and say, don't worry fellas, that's the way it's supposed to be. They said 2 free solos, but that's just the way the faction's supposed to work. As it makes you really then ask the question, is that, well, was really the faction balanced enough that that's the way it's supposed to be needed, that you have to go double the solos to make them work? But then again, maybe that's what they intended. But it really makes you ask that question. Next one, let's do an easy one. Let's go for the scenario where you're supposed to have either 1 free solo, more normal for what everybody else is seeing, or 2 free weapon teams. Well, I think if we're looking at that, we have to really admit that the weapon team is trash. You know, we're not talking about the Commodore, we're not talking about that, we're talking about that little inky dinky cannon that nobody really ever takes. And I think a good comparison is if you looked at anybody else. If you looked at like the other mercenaries and said like, oh yeah, in the Steelhead CID, you can either take a free solo or you can take 2 free weapon teams. And then they're like, oh, 2 free cannons, 2 free mortars, 2 free basically organ guns. Okay, that's amazing. And so when you see how crazy powerful that be, or say like your Rulik mortar team getting 2 of those free, what? Like that'd be just kind of crazy. Just like, why would I take a solo when I could take 2 of these? And so if that's the case, then we're really just admitting that the pirate weapon team is trash. So again, from like a whole balance perspective, I don't think that's really good news for Privateer Press if that's the fix, is that you really have to take 2 of them to be worth 1 of them. So there's that. The other one is that, well, what happens if what it was intended to be happening is it's supposed to be 1? Much like you see everywhere else, except for the 2 Kravitz, is that you're supposed to be getting 1 free solo for all these other things. Well, we got some problems there too. I mean, of course there's the whole issue of like, where'd that 2 come from then? If that was not intended, where was that 2 supposed to go? At what world was this supposed to be there that this random 2 got in there? So there is that question. And again, of course, we have to give Privateer Press the benefit of the doubt that they handle a lot of different scenarios. I'm sure it's not really a thing where they're like, okay, this is what we're proposing, all right, let's go forward. I'm sure it's more of a thing of, here's 5 to 10 different possible scenarios, let's weed this down to the one that we want to go with. So the idea that in one of these multiple versions of one of the things that they're proposing, that one of them got 2, and then that's the one that he accidentally left in there to go out, sure. I mean, again, I can't blame them for that, especially when us mercenary players were pushing them so hard to get that update out. Mistakes, okay, maybe that would happen. Well, here's the real issue though, and that's going to be if it went down to 4 solos you're getting free, is that going to be enough? One of the biggest things that people have always said whenever they compared irregulars to the Talion chapter is that the Talion chapter for the most part is just strictly worse. You have all the things you can be taking in irregulars, and then if you go over to Talion, there's just less. You know, you can either get 4 free solos over here, or 4 free solos over here, and now the 4 are just worse. Now that is a little bit changed now that you can only get 3 free solos in irregulars, but is that still enough? Having that huge amount of options and the advanced move, and well, for those who are doing the whole Jack Marshall thing, is that really worth giving up on to get 1 more free pirate solo? And the answer probably is no. And so that's the real worry, is if you're Privateer Press now and you go over to that, I think that really then turns into mainly a failure of a theme CID, because I don't really think people would be taking it then. They might take some of the Privateer choices, so I don't want to say it was a failed CID, maybe just around the theme, but you have to really realize that if you go down just to 4 solos, I don't think anybody's going to be taking the theme. And I think another thing that Privateer Press has to keep in mind is that whenever you start the bar up high and you bring it down, people are pissed off and they just won't play it. the best example of this, as we've talked about in the past, is the casters. Whenever you have something like Haley 2 and you nerf it, or you have, you know, Gatsby 2 and you nerf it, and you have whatever and you bring it down, it doesn't matter if it's still competitive. People will look at it, think about what it used to be, and see it as trash. And so because we're coming from this and saying, well, we used to be at 8 solos, now it's only 4, that's garbage, push it to the side, you're going to see a lot of that. And I think, you know, at the same time, with those comparisons to other themes, you have to be like, is the Italian thing even really worth it anyway? So we saw it as well like Infernals. When you start with Infernals with a bar really high and bring it down, you disappoint people. So I think almost if nothing else, even if it was a thing where they intended it to be 1 free solo for every 25 points, you might just want to leave it and change it back to being like, oh yeah, no, the 2 that it says there, that's right, we're just going to be changing War Room's code so that they actually realize that and give it to you, just because I think you just piss people off if you did bring it down. And secondly, I don't think that people would play it if you don't. I mean, here's the main thing that we really have to ask ourselves, is that if the Italian CID had 8 free solos, is it going to start winning tournaments? Is it going to start beating Scorn and Circle and all the other things that are dominating right now? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. There's just not really that type of a strength. And so, given those 3 scenarios, between we just have a really crappy weapon team to we have a really disappointing CID to we have something that's different, it's really crazy, but at least it'll get it played, that makes you say that, well, the way that Privateer Press should go is leave it at the 8 possible free solos. Will that then also then bring up more issues of like, well, like I said in the very beginning, that, hey, we have this one theme that only works if you get like 30 free points? Sure, maybe, but I think that's a bigger win and maybe like a smaller loss than if we go with one of the other scenarios. So that's my thinking on it. I want to kind of take you through this because it is pretty interesting. I mean, it's one way to look at this as a player, but you also have to think about this through the eyes of Privateer Press and the different type of, you know, lashback that they might have to deal with, whatever option they decide to go with. So very, very interesting. I just thought I'd throw it out there. You know, if you agree with one of those, please post it down below. I'd love to know if you have a thought on this, but otherwise, we'll catch you later. Bye.